Welcome to the Art of Faith podcast. Today's topic is do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. This is based off of our current series, which is Who is Jordan Peterson? The 12 Rules of Life. This is rule number 5. Once again, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And so to help me today in this very important topic, although it does not apply to everyone, it definitely applies to everyone that has kids or that will have kids. Like, this is a huge deal. And so I'm having our pastor, Michael Jones, our family pastor here at Granite Creek Community Church, just to join me in the conversation. Thank you, Michael, for joining me. Last minute. I gotta tell you, I put him on the spot. I didn't even give him a minute warning.
He's like, "Hey, you have kids?
Yeah. Hey, you've got kids. Don't you
want to
join
make
me
sure
on
you
this
still like
one?"
them? Sure.
So, one of the prerequisites for doing ministry, or for somebody that wants to jump into preaching at our church, that gets that, I hear this often, and it's usually from young men. Pastor Josh, your message really moved me, and I want to become a preacher like you. I want to go into ministry, and so I'll be ready to go to preach the next sermon in a couple of weeks. And so normally I have to stop them and say, "Oh, that's great. I love that. But before you hop up here on stage and before you get the platform, you have to go teach Sunday school." And nobody wants to teach Sunday school.
To do that. Yeah.
But, I was called into ministry in junior high. And then, shortly after that, I knew I had the calling to go into formal ministry, in junior high. And through my high school years, that calling was obvious. And, I was leading the football prayers. I was voted most likely to become a priest in my high school yearbook. And so I knew that was my trajectory. And my parents were very wise, and that I want to say they encouraged me to teach Sunday school, but I think most likely they forced me to teach Sunday school. But I started teaching Sunday school when I was in high school. And then, then I went to college, faded off. And then when I came back, I found myself teaching Sunday school once again. And the foundations of my ministry, beyond what I learned in college, honestly. So I went to a Christian liberal arts college. I did lots of chapels. I did Old Testament survey and New Testament survey. I did apologetics. I did all of these foundational theological orthodoxy classes at Westmont. Did all of this stuff, which was great and invaluable, but I learned how to do ministry by teaching Sunday school.
Yeah.
And so that's what we tell people whenever they feel that ambition or that ego to jump into ministry. I'm like, go teach Sunday school. I learned that from my parents. And when I got back from college and I jumped back into ministry and I started teaching Sunday school again, I had this class. I probably had 10 elementary age students in there, and it was a mix. So I had some street kids. I don't know how to say that in a nice way, but I had some kids that came from underprivileged areas. I had, and this is probably, honestly, it's probably still the same type of demographic that we minister today in our at Granite Creek. Right. So we have a hybrid of different social demographics, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. But we had some poor kids. We had some church kids that were probably middle class families, and then we had some uber church kids. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not quite sure the way to put it, but didn't have any super rich kids. But we had some middle class type family kids, their parents were involved in church, and their kids came to Sunday school. And then we had the super religious kids.
Mm-hmm.
We had the that were homeschool kids, and it's different though. It's totally different these days than it is in the past.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah, 100% is completely different because back in the day, when we were growing up, if you were homeschooled, then you were kind of weird.
Right. You can see them. You can see them a mile away.
You can see them a mile away. Their daughters wore dresses all the way down to their ankles, and their kids button their shirts all the way up to the top.
Right.
But now I would say that homeschooling your kids is probably a necessity for a Christian family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we homeschool our kids, but it was definitely a life that I never saw me ever having.
Yeah.
I worked in the public school setting for years, and there's good and bad things, but ultimately I never saw that craziness. So I actually enjoyed the public school, at least the school that I worked at. I can't speak for all schools, but I never saw my life going that way. And because I do have that thought, that mentality of what a homeschool kid looks like and is, and I'm like, I don't want to have that for my own kids.
Yeah.
And so I like to believe that it's different, and we're not that way, but I don't know.
It's different. It's totally different.
And I do feel like we're doing, at this point, we're doing the right thing.
And at this point in society and where we were at, like so my daughter's now in the middle of high school, but if she was in the middle of elementary, I'd probably pull her out.
Yeah.
Like this, it's just kind of, right now it's probably too late, but I mean.
Yeah. And she's at the age too, where if she's, your daughter got to figure it out. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that she is. I think she's smart enough. And I think by the grace of God, we've given her enough of a foundation to be able to know the difference between education and indoctrination. Right. And I hate to say it, but there is indoctrination that's taking place.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, this is dumb. Like, I just want to learn English. Why do I have to learn this? Because, like, I'll go along with the motions, but, like, I just want to learn how to write an essay. I don't want to learn, Anyway. So, but yeah, I would say for anyone listening, if you have younger kids, I know not everybody has the option or the skills to homeschool, but maybe consider other options at this point. Just the way that things are going, it's just a little out
I guess,
of control.
for me, I know, like, I was so against it, and I had to get to the point where I had to just be open to the idea. And I think that's where I think everyone should be now. Just be open to it.
I think that's good.
And wherever you come out on that, that's okay.
Yeah.
But definitely be open to it.
Yeah, it's, I mean, we don't want to be alarmist or extremist in the area of our walk. And then there's a couple of different camps on how we should engage into the public education system. There's some Christian groups, and I'm not going to say that one is better than the other, because honestly, I just don't know. But there's one set of Christian groups that will say we have to cloister, we have to protect our kids, we have to pull our kids out of this system because the system is going to corrupt them and destroy them, which could be easily the case. And we could probably easily make an argument for that just by experience. But then there's the other side of the Christian camp that will say, no, we need to be a light in a dark place. We need to be, it's the whole 7 mountain mandate that stuff, which is highly controversial. But like, we need to make sure that our kids are in the public school system. That way that they can evangelize other kids, or that, Christian parents can have a place of leadership on the boards of the, and the PTAs and such. Now, I honestly, I don't know what the right answer is. I know that for me being a pastor, I think that it is best for my kid that she is in a public school setting. If she had a twin that had a different disposition, I might take her out and homeschool her.
Right.
I mean, so I don't know. It's a tough question,
thing,
but for the individual, I mean, and this takes a lot of grace and prayer, but I think that she is, where she needs to be.
Right.
She is a light in the dark place. She's learning.
Mm-hmm.
She understands the difference between, again, propaganda and education. I think that she does.
That's great.
Yeah. She and we've made it to a place where she can talk to us about what she thinks, what she believes, or how she's feeling about certain topics, and we're having very open, transparent conversations about that. That's been helpful.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, I think by the grace of God, hopefully we're doing good. We will see.
Right.
But this topic that Jordan Peterson presents, and just to reference, I think that Jordan Peterson is going to be an important public figure for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the questions that he raises and the rules that he proposes are not only important for society and for individuals, I also think that they're important for the church.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, rule number 5, is important for the church. And you and I have had this conversation before, even before I've even read this book. You and I have talked about this. But rule number 5 is don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Before this book came out, Michael and I would talk about the concept, like, we're doing church, we're doing ministry, we're both called to full-time public ministry. Like, this is what we do for a living. And, but, we're going to work hard, we're going to try and help families. But if our kids grow up hating God and hating church and hating us,
Mm-hmm.
then what's the point of it all?
Right.
And that's and that's a tough thing to work out. And so I don't, so far so good. My daughter's 15 and she loves church. She might even love church more than I love church. so that's kind of exciting.
That's great. Yeah.
She doesn't get to go to youth group as often as she would like because she's, school's hard for her.
Mm-hmm.
But she loves it,
Mm-hmm.
and she loves God. I'm like, oh my gosh, like she didn't get that from me and Mako. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe she did. But like, if she hated us, if she hated God,
Mm-hmm.
if she hated church, that would be a hard place for me to be.
Yeah, I think it goes just to the idea that your home life is your number one ministry, right? As pastors, we have the congregation, we have flocks, we have people that we deal with and help with every day, but they have to be second fiddle to our family always.
Yeah.
And I know, like, the good thing, or like, the glory thing would be is like, oh, try to take care of everybody, but
Right.
But number one is it's the family.
I mean, that might seem like a no duh for those that are listening, but in generations past, family is almost secondary to career, and
the church.
That has bled over into the church, and I know this from personal experience, not from my parents. My parents were awesome at making sure that that their kids' needs were met before the church. They did a great job at doing that. But being a pastor's kid and being around other pastors' kids, I know that is not the truth.
Right.
The truth is that mom and dad's career as being vocational pastors trumped everything else, including family. And, right now, I mean, in part of the podcast studio, we have evangelist Johnny Smith, who's my grandfather. So we've got this revival banner up here. And Johnny Smith was an incredible evangelist. He did tent revivals from California to Oklahoma to Kentucky. I mean, he just traveled all over the place. He was an amazing evangelist. And honestly, he probably wasn't the best father in the world. although he tried,
Mm-hmm.
he just couldn't sit still. And he had 4 kids that were sometimes little wild Indians and out of control at times. And he just, I don't know. I mean, and what I think is a good snapshot of the 1950s, 60s nuclear family.
Right.
So where everything was projected to being perfect on the outside, but on the inside, they did not have the skills or the training and to be a normal family, or to raise kids, or to help kids out if they were dealing with difficult situations or psychological situations or emotional situations. And I think that might have been the case with my grandfather. He just didn't have the skills to deal with it.
Tools, right.
Didn't have the education to deal with it in a lot of senses. And so I think we've grown and we've learned a lot. So there's some skills that we know about now that we can apply to family life. There's traditions from, the Johnny Smith era that we have abandoned, like sitting around the table and having a meal together as a family. Right. We don't do that on a weekly basis. I don't know about you guys. You probably do, but
we try to at least do it once.
Do you?
Once or twice, yeah. We try to make it a point where we do that.
We do, but it's usually in front of the TV.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that I don't know
we
if
have
that
those
counts
too.
or not. But so there's definitely something to be learned from that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's family of origin stuff is important to think about when we're raising our kids.
Yeah.
So I think my mom and dad were great at seeing some of the things that they did not want to translate into, their raising their kids, which was the absentee father thing. And they did a great job at doing that.
Yeah. I think it's funny because I always think about that, and I feel like every generation, we want our kids to be better than us, right? We want our kids to be better than who we are. And
most people do.
Most people do, right? Yeah. Good parents do.
Good parents do.
But I wonder that, because I felt like my parents were great, but there were definitely some things that I didn't want to incorporate. Yeah. And I wonder about with my kids, there's going to be some things that my kids don't think me and Jenny got that wrong. We're changing that. And so, which is great, and I hope that does happen. So
I think that there's some cultural expectations that get laid over us that we don't see. What Jordan points out in this rule number 5 is absolutely amazing. But let me highlight it. So I'll go back to teaching Sunday school.
Okay.
So I had these idealistic ideas about, being a spiritual leader for a bunch of kids. I thought that they were all just going to hang on every word that I said and that I was going to, captivate them, and they were all going to sit still and around a circle around me and listen to me, teach from the Word of God. But the reality was, as I'm trying to teach this lesson about Joseph in his multicolored coat, I had, again, a wide demographic of kids, poor kids, rich kids, or semi-rich kids, church kids, non-church kids, uber churched kids. That was just, so these 2 boys that were really out of control. Hyper out of control. And so, they, in retrospect, I can kind of see why there was a little bit of, tension there, because they've been cooped up in a classroom all week long. And then on their day off on Sunday, they're required to be cooped up into another classroom and, once again, learn a lesson and try to hold still. So I can appreciate them not wanting to be there. But at the same time, these kids were absolutely horrible. Horrible children. And it it gets back into this, this question that Peterson raises, I think, is do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And these kids, these two boys, were dislikable. Like, I remember, me trying to be a spiritual leader for a bunch of young kids, and like I hated these kids. I hated them because they were like I wanted to strangle them.
Yeah. They're the kids that, like, when they don't show up that week, you're like,
oh, thank you, Lord.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. And there was this one incident, and I just didn't know what to do. And one kid said to another kid, and the other kid happened to be a homeschooled kid that was buttoned up, like just completely sheltered. Couldn't watch cartoons, so like no Bugs Bunny because that's violent, right? So definitely no bad words. Like this, like the perfect homeschooled kid, completely sheltered, no TV, and there was no internet at this time. And then this other kid, for whatever reason, I don't even know what the context was. I just remember what he said. He just said, "I'm gonna make a crap sandwich and make you eat it."
Oh my God.
I know. And so this one kid, and this is a church kid, by the way. So this is a non-homeschooled church kid who was actually an elder's kid. And Luke, you know who this kid is, by the way. Luke is our visual AV guy. Yeah, so he says, "I'm going to make but he didn't say crap. He said the S word.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So he said this to this homeschool kid. "I'm going to make this sandwich. I'm going to make you eat it." I don't even know why he said this, but I was just petrified. And I took him and this other boy that were like feeding on it off of each other about how bad that they can be. And like I think that the ultimate goal was just to make me angry, which they completely accomplished. They accomplished.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kill him. Like I really wanted to strangle him, but didn't. But I disliked him intensely. These two boys, I disliked them intensely because one, they messed up my program, and then two, they just like these are supposed to be church kids,
right? Yeah,
and they're like bullying a little girl, telling her. Not only just a little girl, but a sweet little girl that's a homeschool kid. Be like one of your kids.
Yeah.
Like, how would you feel like if some kid says to one of your kids, I want to make a crap sandwich. I'm going to make you eat it.
Horrible.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And so I disliked this kid, these two boys. And I had to vent, and I talked to the children's pastor. So you all should have extreme grace for your children's pastors and your youth pastors, because they deal with stuff that you have no idea that they're dealing with. And luckily, she handled it, and she dealt with the parents. And there was a sit down with the parents, like, your kid can't talk to other kids like this. Your kid can't be a bully in Sunday school. And again, this is not the poor kid. This is not the kid that came out of the gang lifestyle. This is the church kid.
Yeah.
And nobody likes this kid. And so I think what Jordan is saying is, don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. He even pushes it that makes other people dislike them. And I think that's a really important question for us to ask.
Yeah.
It's like, do you like your kid? And he will, like, again, Peterson is a clinical psychologist. And so he's dealing with kids and families that are working around the situation. And I think probably this is where it applies to us probably more than the Johnny Smith generation, is that there was just no discipline in the home. And that parents are parenting kids to the ultimate effect that they can be friends. we're not called to be our children's friends. We're called to be our children's parents.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the rub right there.
Right. Yeah. And it's too the idea of I can think of how cute it is when your kid in the beginning like hits you. It's funny, like the minute your kid gives like a little attitude, like, oh, it's funny, it's cute. But you're not gonna want them doing that at teenagers and that's something like if you cut it off because you're gonna dislike it, don't let them keep doing that.
Yeah.
You know? But
Peterson makes this indication that the most violent humans on the planet, the most prone to violence, the most destructive humans on the planets are toddlers.
Yeah.
They're 2-year-olds. They're 3-year-olds.
That's great.
Because when they get angry, they punch you in the face. Mm-hmm. When they want something, they act out in violence. And yeah, we think it's cute. Mm-hmm. And we don't do anything to correct it. We don't. Like, oh, Johnny's just being a toddler. He's just, he's just going to punch you in the face. And, or Susie is crying and, oh, she's sad. And Peterson will make the distinction. No, she's not sad. She's crying because she's angry. Mm-hmm. And we don't address that as parents. And the result is we spoil our kids. And, for whatever good intentions that we come into it as Christian parents, a lot of Christian parents have spoiled their kids. And I think that's a tragedy in a lot of areas. And we're all guilty of it, right? Mm-hmm. We all want the best for our kids, and we all, make concessions for our kids because we want them to be happy. But if we continue to let them rule over us trying to parent, then we will create kids that we don't like.
Right. And I think too, like, we could all possibly do that. Right?
We all do, yeah.
Like, there's all a possibility that we can create that in our own kids. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying like, I'm immune to it, but it's just trying to be intentional and capture those moments when they happen and trying to think the bigger picture of things, because it's not, in a sense, it's not fair to the kid, right?
No.
They grow up thinking one way, they have a belief, they think they're having fun. Just like going back to the hitting thing. And like, I felt like I have 3 kids. And you think I would have learned on the first one, but I've had 3 kids that kind of have to go through those motions of, hey, don't do that. Or, and I wrestle with my kids and I play with my kids, but they don't understand when that switch turns on and off.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. Like, you can't just be doing that. Like, my son for the longest time would just come with his flat palm and just slap me in the back. And if it's summer, I don't have my shirt on in the house, and it stings. Yeah. And then I had to get to the point where I had to show him, like, look, your little handprints on me. Yeah. And then he'd be like, oh, I didn't mean to do that.
So he didn't realize it, huh?
Yeah, he didn't realize it. And he thought it was just kind of fun, like, oh, we're wrestling again. But it's like, look me in the eye before we wrestle first. So.
Peterson. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that Peterson's a Christian. Mm-hmm. Like, he's made some very profound statements on the internet about the gospel and about grace, about what Jesus has done for us. Like, it's pretty clear that he is. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure at the time when he wrote this book and we rewrote this chapter. I don't know where his faith journey was or is. But what he does do in this chapter is he fleshes out the idea of original sin. Mm. And in previous podcasts, I've talked about the idea that the most violent people in the world are the ones that have the concept of territory and possessions. So the reason why Cain killed Abel is because he was a farmer, and that this was his land, and that this was his, his property. He grew this crop, and he was required to give a portion of it, and he gave some of it, and it wasn't a tenth, and so that's where the tension became, because it was his.
That's good, yeah.
Where Abel, on the other hand, was the hunter gatherer who had no concept of property and possession, and he just gave freely back to God because he knew that it wasn't his, it was what God provided. So so I like that idea. I'm not saying that's not true, but I think it's a great idea to think about.
Yeah, that's good.
But what Peterson begins to highlight in the human nature and in the natural order is that in the natural order and the fallenness of beings, like, we're not good. Like, there's just something violent about us. And I didn't even know this until I read this book. But Jane Goodall, who did the whole study on the gorillas and the chimpanzees.
Mm-hmm.
So she's the anthropologist that was studying gorillas and chimpanzees. And there's all these incredible videos of her hugging monkeys, and how these monkeys are giving her bananas, and they're very affectionate, holding a baby, and they're crying and stuff like that, which is all very beautiful and touching, and I'm all about it. But ironically, what she did not report is that these gorillas, and specifically the chimpanzees, were extremely violent.
Yeah.
And that they would participate in clan warfare.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And they would kill each other.
Yeah.
Not only would they just kill each other, they would do it in sadistic ways. Like, they would drink each other's blood, and they would torture each other just for the sake of torture. And Jane did not put this in her reports. Because she didn't want people to think ill of monkeys. Because the academic angle was that society was the driving force that made people evil.
Mm.
So there was the whole concept of the savage noble, the noble savage, like, that the wild people that are just tied to the land, that they're more peaceable. But Jordan will begin to explain statistically that the most violent people in the world are the ones that are that they don't have rules applied to them, they don't have boundaries applied to them.
Yeah.
So some of the Native American Californians statistically are the most violent individuals the world has ever seen.
Wow.
They don't tell us that in school, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
And I do think that it is tied to possession and property, and that concept, that sinful in nature, and that Americans are proportionally more violent than, say Europeans or British people for some reason. I don't know what the exact number on that is, but Americans are a little more violent than most Europeans. But some of the most, like Papua New Guinea and some of these other tribes and some African tribes, like, per percentage, are more violent. And so what he's getting into is like we're geared for violence. And we've hinted at this in church every once in a while, but we need to come to the realization that our kids are sinners. And like once you've tried to parent a 2-year-old, there's something evil about that kid.
You don't need too much convincing me. That my kids need Jesus. So
and
my kids are great. They're 100% great, but they need some Jesus.
But yeah, like it's weird when you see the sin nature pop up in your own kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? Where did that statistic element come from?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like, if we as parents, when we see our kids like do something evil, if we don't address that immediately and try and cut that off at the root, like there's some generational stuff that we're just not aware of,
right?
And we need to make sure that we address it.
It's like, I never taught my kid to lie.
All right,
but they have.
Wait, where does that come
right
from?
Right to my face.
Yeah,
I didn't eat that cookie. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Or I love when something happens and I get all three of them and I look them all in the eye. Who did this? I don't know. Come on. Your mom? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
so
dog,
I'm pretty sure that Jenny didn't teach your kids how to lie, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's weird how that stuff just creeps in. And I know, like, one of the big things too, for me, and it was in my son he's really small. I mean, he's 8 now, but when I had to have this, like our first man talk was, you do not hit girls.
Yeah.
He's got an older sister. He's got a younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
And he would hit them. And that was like, he had to see it in my eyes. Like, I'm talking to you about my daughters. These are my daughters. You do not hit my daughters. And so he got that. And I'm not saying like it was like from that day he never hit again. He's had some moments, but he understands the gravity that you don't hit daddy's daughter. You don't hit girls at all. And oh man, it was funny, but it was also bad. And this is kind of like what we're talking about. You can't encourage it. We didn't encourage it, but his younger sister, one time they were having a little tiff in the den, and they were talking. And the girl, my younger daughter, said, "Well, I'm going to tell on you." Well, he's like, "I didn't do anything." "Well, I'm going to tell daddy you hit me." And like, so she knew, like, that's the big no-no. And she knew that's how she can get to him. So, so then that was a come to Jesus talk with her that we had to have. But, and there was another time where I think she tried to pull that card, and he was very serious. Like, "No, I did not. Dad told me not. Like, I don't hit girls. I don't hit girls." And, but yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where, like, generationally, if I didn't come to that, or I could have been like, "Yeah, your older sister's bigger than you, and if she hits you, you should be able to hit her back." I could have said that, and it will get her to stop. But from the beginning, like, don't hit girls. Don't hit and then girls. I'm going to have a separate conversation with my daughters.
Don't tell lies.
Don't tell lies, and don't hit boys either. Right. Yeah. We just don't hit in the house. But yeah, he got that.
Peterson's kind of fleshing out this idea in this chapter, and he talks about the whole concept where, like, violence is easy.
Oh yeah, it is easy.
It's the easy answer, where peace is the harder road to take. Mm-hmm. And biblically and scripturally, like that's the hard part, is becoming people of peace.
Yeah.
And self-control. We think that addiction is hard, right? You know what's harder than addiction is self-control.
Self-control. It's not wanting to hit something or hit somebody, right?
Right.
Because let's be honest, that in the moment, that would make us feel better. Mm-hmm. Like, we have whatever we're dealing with, anger or whatever. It's like, I need this out, and I just want to hit something. Yeah. That's the easy, good, like, feeling good way to do it. But that's not what we're called to do.
Yeah. I know, like, when we're trying to discipline our kids, it's just easier to put on an Elmo video instead.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's easier to just give them some ice cream, give them what they want, to cave to their screaming, or to cave to their whining, because we don't want to listen to them whine anymore. That's the easier path, right? Mm-hmm. So spoiling our kids giving them what they want financially, emotionally, materially. Like, we think that costs us something, but actually what is actually more costly is disciplining them.
Yeah.
Sitting them down and saying, yeah, you're going to go to sleep now.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go to sleep.
Right.
You can't watch.
Mm-hmm.
You can't watch Elmo anymore.
Yeah.
You can't watch your iPad anymore. We're gonna turn the lights off, and
this needs to happen,
and you're gonna cry it out.
Yeah.
And we don't want to hear our kids cry it out.
Yeah.
We think that they're in pain, but they're not in pain. Mm-hmm. They're in anger.
Yeah. And then you got like all these talking heads, like, that's not the right thing to do, and you should be doing this.
Right.
But then, I know people where they have little bit kids that are older than me, and they're like, yeah, my kid still sleeps in our bed because you never, which we're all, we had that moment where our kids were sleeping in our bed, but there was a time where that needs to stop.
Yeah.
And you need to just, don't be lazy about it. Just get it going.
Yeah. And I think that requires a bit of wisdom and guidance. And like, I think that there's some good research on, sleeping together as a family. Like that's okay. But yeah, at some point they need to be kicked out. Mm-hmm. Right. Oh my gosh. I think that you probably remember this, but there was a point when like there was a family in the church and the mom was still breastfeeding. Yeah, you remember that?
I do remember that.
You remember that?
Some of the most awkward times of my life.
It was the worst. The kid's 5 years old.
Yeah.
He needs to quit breastfeeding.
Like in the middle of a church conversation.
Yeah. And it's like, well, this is natural. This is. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. No.
I think this is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And those were hard conversations that we had to have, and we're all about breastfeeding. Like, it's not an issue. Like, like, get over it. They're just gonna breastfeed your child. Like, be a man. It's not that big of a deal. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was like, this is like you're hurting your kid.
Mm-hmm. Like, you're doing it out in public.
Yeah.
Like
you're hurting
I don't
your
know.
kid.
Yeah. It was just
like other 5-year-olds are making fun of your kid because of this.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. If kids are making fun of your kid,
then that's your sign.
Yeah.
Crazy church life, isn't it? some of the things that we have to build or out of the ordinary. I think probably that in contemporary modern culture, like for you and me, growing up in our generation, there was that correction of over disciplining kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got spanked a few times. Did you ever get spanked?
I got spanked.
You got spanked?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But and there's good research on this that probably spanking kids is not a good idea, right? And because the whole idea is, you just hit your sister because you hit your sister. I'm going to give you a spanking.
Yeah.
And so that completely makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like that's confusing language. But on the other hand, if you don't discipline your kids in some way, if you just say, well, they just need to express themselves, then we create kids that we don't like.
Yeah.
And that's a tough situation to be in. I love hanging out with my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's been times where I've disciplined her in areas, and but we'll be honest. My wife is the disciplinarian, and I'm fun dad. But we've always been on the same page. Like this, we need to apply this boundary in her life, or else it's going to be out of control. And so I think we've done a good job of doing that. But this is tough to say, but I've heard it said even recently for people that have adult kids, I don't like my kid.
Mm.
And I shared before you even started the podcast. I heard somebody say to me, "My kid's an asshole,"
Mm.
and I was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
I mean, they're referring to their adult child, so they've got 20 plus years of raising this kid, and they're calling their 20-year-old or 20 plus year old kid an asshole.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, we're doing something wrong here, because not only do you view your own child as an asshole, you're like using that language, you're labeling your own child as that.
Yeah.
And this is something that we've had conversations with over and over again, but your child's not serving the Lord either. And I mean, we're not even anywhere near cracking that problem or solving that problem of, seeing our kids grow up to serve the Lord. And I was just like looking at I was looking at my Facebook, this year, 12 years ago when I was the youth pastor, I had this picture of the youth group. It's like, oh my gosh. One out of these 7 kids is in church. And that's I know some of them I'm kind of in quasi relationship with. It's like, I don't even know if those kids are good people.
Yeah.
Like, there's a couple of these kids, like, I know that they're not good people. Like, people don't like them. They're not respectable in society. And it's like, geez.
Yeah.
Like, where do we go wrong here?
Yeah. That's
I'll just blame the parents. I'm not going to blame myself.
Yeah, ultimately, now that I have, because, when we were both youth pastors and we really didn't have kids, but now we have our own. It's I'm just going to be worried about my kids. I'm not going to be worried about everyone else's kids.
Yeah.
But,
well, I mean, and then here's the youth pastor topic. Like, you and I both were frustrated with how parents parent their kids.
Yeah.
And then, we see that with our colleagues that are doing it and people that are doing it now. It's just like, yeah, we know exactly. We know exactly what you're going through.
It's a never ending. It's like the same problem we've all faced.
Yeah. I mean, we've even tweaked our ministry to be like, okay, we need to support the family unit and not just try to be, cool youth pastor. Like, we need to be able to support the whole family unit. We're here as a team, not just as, the pastor for youth. And I think we've made good adjustments in heading in that direction. Yeah.
I mean, time will definitely tell.
Time will tell. Yeah.
It's interesting because it's almost as if, for me, being a parent, like, I learned how to parent by being a youth pastor.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially being a Christian parent. I mean, I grew up, Catholic, but I wouldn't say I grew up in a Christian home per se. So I really wouldn't know what to do if I wasn't a youth pastor, learning the good and bad from the church kid parents. And, but it definitely has helped.
Yeah. Like, I don't want my kid to end up like that kid.
Right.
So
exactly.
I'm going to discipline my kid.
Yeah.
So
I know where that went wrong, so I'm not going to go that way. So, and then there are some things, let's be honest, that before having a kid, I said, well, I would never do that. And I have caught myself doing it. So, it's easier said than done, I guess.
It is. And let me just end on this idea, because, maybe that there's some parents that are listening that might be frustrated and, like, did I totally screw up? And I've heard, you and I have both heard this. Did I screw my kids up? Have I been a bad parent? like there's grace for that.
Mhm.
And yeah, we all could have done things differently. But we also know practically, even the best of parents have screwed up kids.
Oh yeah.
And if this helps you to understand it and put it into perspective, the best father in the universe has got screwed up kids.
Yeah,
Right?
God. Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Yep.
So the Lord himself, the perfect being,
Mm-hmm.
the perfect father, has got kids that are screwed up.
Yeah.
And he hasn't given up. I'm sure that, well, I'm not sure. I mean, you read the Bible, you know that the Lord's frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
He expresses his frustration, but he hasn't given up on his kids.
Yeah. And he doesn't call us assholes either.
He doesn't call us assholes.
Yeah.
And so I think that, in retrospect, we all could have done things differently. We all could have disciplined our kids better. We all could have read some
Books,
better
self-help
parenting books.
Yeah.
We all could have gone to that Christian parenting conference that we didn't want to pay for. Like we all could have done something a little bit better. But the truth is, even despite our best efforts, there is a sin nature, and rebellion is inherent in every human being. I only have one kid. You've got 3 kids. And you guys are doing a great job.
Oh, thanks.
You guys are great parents. And we're just going to declare and believe that all 3 of your kids are going to be awesome. But even though if you guys are the most perfect parents, your 3 kids also have free will.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to choose if they're going to be obedient or rebellious. And that's beyond anything that you can parent into.
Yep.
And that's a hard pill to swallow.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And, but free will is I think free will is the ultimate gift of God. Mm-hmm. Despite what our Calvinist friends might think, free will is a big deal.
Yeah.
So, all right. Don't let your kids do anything that makes you dislike them. So if your kids are behaving in ways that make you not like them, if your kids are behaving in ways that makes your Sunday school teachers want to strangle them,
yeah, listen to your Sunday school teachers.
Yeah, then make some adjustments. Yeah. And because you want your kids to grow up, like the ultimate measure of success for a parent is that your kids are loving God, loving church, and loving family. It's like they're going to want to come over to your house for holidays. They're going to want to hang out. They're going to want to come to, the Christmas Eve candlelight service with you. That's a good sign of success. If you don't have that success, the beautiful thing about the Christian faith is that there's grace and redemption. And God can turn any situation around and make it good.
Yeah. Never too late.
It's never too late. So, all right. I hope this one was a blessing. This is definitely a specific one on parenting. So again, if you know parents, go ahead and forward this to them. And I want to encourage you to read the book. Look, Jordan Peterson is not a pastor. He's not a spiritual leader, but I think he's got important things to say to society and to as individuals. And once again, I think he's got some things to say to the church that we can all learn from. So God bless you guys. Thanks for watching Art of Faith podcast. I don't think I have any visuals for you on this one, but it's going to be good. So hope you got a good listen. God bless you guys, and see you next time.